When the galaxy's weakest cried for help, the crystalline spires of Seraph Prime gleamed like diamonds against the purple sky, their surfaces reflecting the twin suns that had nurtured this peaceful world for millennia. Dr. Zara Velnine floated gracefully through the corridors of the Central Research Institute, her translucent wings catching the ambient light as she moved. The Seraphs had evolved on a world of perfect harmony, where storms were gentle breezes and the most dangerous creature was no larger than a human hand. But today, the serenity was shattered by the screaming of warning sirens that echoed through every crystal tower on the planet. Zara pressed her delicate fingers against the neural interface panel, her large violet eyes scanning the incoming data with growing horror. The Drakari Empire's warfleet had just dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of their system, their massive black ships like a plague of locusts against the stars. She had seen the reports from other worlds, peaceful civilizations that had been crushed under the weight of Drakari conquest. The pattern, though, is the same. Ultimatum, brief resistance, then submission or extinction. The Seraphs were scholars. And artists, not warriors. Their bones were hollow like birds, their muscles designed for flight rather than fighting. They had never needed weapons because they had never known war. Their greatest achievement was not military might, but the Great Archive, a vast collection of knowledge from across the galaxy gathered over 10,000 years of peaceful exploration. Elder Num 7, Zara called out as the aged Seraph Elder glided into the research chamber, his ancient wings barely supporting his frail form. The Drakari fleet numbers over 300 vessels. Our defense fleet has 12 ships designed for exploration, not combat. The Elder's luminous skin dimmed with sorrow. How long do we have, young scholar? 18 hours until they reach orbit. Their transmission demands complete surrender, or they will begin orbital bombardment. Zara's voice trembled despite her efforts to remain calm. Elder, we cannot fight them. But perhaps we do not have to face them alone. Elder Nim 7 tilted his head in confusion. Child, there is no one to call. The Galactic Council disbanded when the Drakari began their expansion. Every civilization within 50 light years has either fallen or fled. Zara activated a holographic display, showing an ancient star chart filled with data from the deepest archives. Elder, 3 cycles ago, while cataloging the restricted archives, I found references to a world the ancients called Terra. The records are fragmented, but they speak of a species that evolved under conditions so harsh that other civilizations classified their planet as uninhabitable. The Crucible Worlds, Elder Nim 7 whispered, his eyes widening. I thought those were myths, stories to frighten younglings about the dangerous regions of space. Not myths, Elder. The fragments describe beings called humans who survived on a world where the very environment tried to kill them every day. Extreme weather, deadly predators, poisonous plants, and unstable geology. The records say they became strong not through conquest, but through survival. Zara pulled up more data streams. Look at this, Elder. The few encounters other species had with them describe warriors who fought with a ferocity born from constant struggle against death itself. The Elder examined the ancient records with growing amazement. Fascinating. A species forged by adversity rather than comfort. But child, these records are over 1,000 years old. How do we know they still exist? Before Zara could respond, the building shook as the first Drakari scout ships entered the atmosphere. Through the crystal walls they could see the sleek, predatory craft sweeping over the city like harbingers of doom. The transmission that followed filled every screen on the planet. Emperor Krathvar appeared on the displays, his reptilian features twisted in cruel amusement. The Drakari were massive beings, their scales like natural armor, their claws designed for tearing flesh. They had evolved as apex predators on a world where strength determined survival, and they had carried that philosophy to the stars. Creatures of Seraph Prime, the Emperor's voice boomed through the city's communication systems. I am Emperor Krathvar of the Drakari Empire. Your world has been selected for incorporation into our domain. You have 12 hours to surrender unconditionally. Your scholars will serve as information gatherers. Your artists will create monuments to Drakari glory, and your young will be trained as servants. Resist, and your crystal cities will become glass dust beneath our weapons. The transmission ended, leaving the Seraphs in stunned silence. Across the planet, panic began to spread, as the reality of their situation became clear. They had no weapons that could penetrate Drakari armor, no ships that could outrun Drakari fighters, and no warriors trained for the brutal reality of interstellar warfare. Elder, Zara said with sudden determination, if these humans still exist, if they truly are the Crucible Forged warriors the archives describe, they may be our only hope. I am going to attempt to send a distress signal to their world. Elder Nim7 considered this for a moment, then nodded slowly. Do what you must, young scholar. If legends can save us, then let us believe in legends. Zara worked frantically at her station, using the most powerful transmitter on Seraph Prime to boost the signal toward the coordinates listed in the ancient archives. She poured all her knowledge of galactic linguistics into crafting a message that could be understood by beings who had been isolated from the galaxy for over a millennium. The signal that left Seraph Prime was desperate and beautiful, carrying with it the accumulated knowledge and artistry of an entire civilization facing extinction. It spoke of peace-loving beings under attack by those who knew only conquest, of the innocent crying out to legends for salvation far across the void. On a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star, the signal was received by humanity's Deep Space Monitoring Station, Kepler-7. Lieutenant Commander Maya Reyes was on duty when the alien transmission broke through Earth's defensive screening protocols. She had been monitoring space for 15 years and had never heard anything like it. The voice that spoke through the static was hauntingly beautiful, filled with harmonics that human ears could barely perceive. Despite the alien nature of the language, the emotion was unmistakable. Desperation, hope, and a plea that transcended species barriers. Admiral Chen to the Communications Center, Priority Alpha. Maya's voice echoed through the station as she activated the emergency protocols. Within minutes, Admiral Sarah Chen arrived at the monitoring station, her gray hair tied back in the regulation military style that had become her trademark over 30 years of service. Admiral Chen was a veteran of Earth's resource wars, the brutal conflicts that had shaped humanity's modern military doctrine. She had learned warfare in the Australian outback during the water crisis, where soldiers had to fight while enduring temperatures that could kill an unprotected human in hours. Her eyes held the hard wisdom of someone who had seen civilization nearly collapse and had helped rebuild it stronger than before. What do we have, Lieutenant Commander? Chan asked, studying the waveform analysis on the screens around them. Nam, we've received what appears to be a distress call from an extraterrestrial. Source. The signal is highly sophisticated, suggesting an advanced civilization. They're under attack by what they describe as a conquering empire. Maya pulled up the translation matrix that the station's AI had generated. Admiral, they're specifically asking for help from what they call the pain-forged or crucible-born warriors. The references seem to be describing humanity. Admiral Chun studied the data with growing intensity. The implications were staggering. First contact with alien life, and it was a cry for help. How far away is the source? Approximately 47 light years, ma'am. The Kepler 442 system. Long-range scans show signs of a massive space battle in progress. Chan was quiet for a long moment, processing what this meant for humanity. Earth had spent the last century rebuilding after the climate wars and resource conflicts that had nearly destroyed human civilization. But from that crucible of suffering, humanity had emerged harder, more determined, and more unified than ever before. They had learned to survive in environments that would kill most other known life forms, to adapt to any challenge, and to never give up even when facing impossible odds. Ma'am, Maya continued, there's something else. The linguistic analysis? suggests these beings have been observing us for centuries. They have detailed records of our evolutionary history, our wars, our survival through multiple near-extinction events. To them, we're not just another species. We're survivors of what they consider an impossible world. Admiral Chun thought about humanity's journey from the caves of Africa to the stars above Earth. Every generation had faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. Ice ages, plagues, wars, environmental collapse, and resource depletion. Each time, humanity had not just survived, but had grown stronger. They had learned to thrive in deserts and Arctic tundra, to dive to the deepest ocean trenches and climb the highest mountains. Earth had been a harsh teacher, but it had created a species, uniquely adapted to overcome any obstacle. Lieutenant Commander, patch me through to Fleet Command. We need to convene an emergency session of the Global Defense Council. Chen paused, looking at the star charts showing the location of the distress signal. And Maya began preparations for Operation Lighthouse. If there are peaceful beings out there facing extinction, then it's time the galaxy learned what Earth's children can do. Within 6 hours, the most powerful leaders on Earth had gathered in the underground command center beneath the Swiss Alps. President Elena Rodriguez of the United Earth Government, General Zhang Wei of the Combined Military Forces, and Director James Okafor of the Space Development Agency sat around a table that had been built to coordinate humanity's defense against global threats. Admiral Chun presented the situation with the clinical precision that had made her Earth's most respected military strategist. Ladies and gentlemen, we face a decision that will define humanity's place in the galaxy. An advanced but peaceful civilization is being destroyed by a conquering empire. They have specifically asked for our help based on their knowledge of our evolutionary history. General Zhang studied the tactical data on his display. Admiral, our analysis suggests this Drakari Empire has technology centuries ahead of our own. How can we possibly intervene effectively? General, with respect, technology isn't everything. The reports indicate that both civilizations evolved. On worlds far easier than Earth, the Seraphs developed in paradise, the Drakari on a world where strength mattered but survival was guaranteed. Neither has faced the kind of existential challenges that forged humanity. Director Okafor leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. You're suggesting that our evolutionary advantages might overcome their technological superiority? I'm suggesting that humanity has something neither side has ever encountered: the ability to adapt, survive, and thrive under any conditions. We've trained our soldiers in environments that would kill most life forms. We've learned to fight when wounded, to think when exhausted, and to never surrender even when facing certain death. President Rodriguez spoke quietly, her voice carrying the weight of representing 8 billion people. Admiral Chen, if we do this, we will be announcing humanity's presence to the galaxy. There will be no going back to isolation. Madame President, isolation was always temporary. Eventually, someone would have found us. The question is whether we want to be discovered as victims or as protectors of those who cannot protect themselves. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in human history, Earth would send its forces beyond the solar system, not to explore or colonize, but to answer a cry for help from strangers among the stars. Dr. Marcus Steele stood in the hangar bay of the UES. Redemption, watching as the finest soldiers humanity had ever produced, prepared for humanity's first interstellar war. The men and women around him had been forged in the crucibles of Earth's harshest environments. They had trained in the Sahara Desert, the Siberian Arctic, the deepest ocean trenches, and the radiation-soaked zones around defunct nuclear reactors. Steele himself was a product of the Antarctic Survival Corps, where soldiers learned to fight and survive in conditions that could freeze exposed flesh in minutes. His second-in-command, Commander Lisa Torres, had earned her reputation leading rescue operations in the toxic ruins of the old industrial zones, where a single breath of unfiltered air could be fatal. Captain, Torres said, as she approached, her equipment pack containing enough gear to survive in any known environment. The fleet is reporting ready for jump. 12 ships, 8,000 personnel, and enough firepower to level a continent. Steele nodded, but his mind was on something else entirely. Commander, do you think they really understand what they're asking for? These Serifs spent millennia in peace and prosperity. They're calling on a species that learned warfare by fighting its own planet every single day. Captain, maybe that's exactly what they need. They've never faced real adversity, so they don't know how to fight it. We've never known anything else. As the fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace, Admiral Chen's voice echoed through every ship. People of Earth, today we take our first step as guardians of the galaxy. We go not as conquerors, but as protectors. We carry with us the strength that Earth gave us, the determination that our ancestors earned through suffering, and the hope that peace can be defended by those willing to pay the price for it. The jump to hyperspace engaged, and humanity's first expeditionary force vanished into the void, racing toward a distant world where legends would become reality, and Earth's children would show the galaxy what Crucible Forge warriors could accomplish. When fighting for something greater than themselves in the depths of space, the human fleet moved like an arrow of purpose toward Seraph Prime, carrying with them the accumulated strength of a species that had survived every challenge a harsh universe could devise. Behind them, Earth continued its ancient rotation, unaware that its children were about to become the galaxy's newest protectors. The age of human isolation was ending, and the age of Terra's guardians was about to begin. Asterisk Part 2, Earth's Children. Bring the storm. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Kepler 442 system to witness a scene of systematic destruction. Seraph Prime hung in space like a wounded jewel, its crystal cities burning beneath a rain of plasma fire from the Drakari bombardment fleet. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Redemption, watching through the viewports as another of the planet's magnificent spires collapsed into glittering fragments. Tactical report, Chun commanded, her voice steady despite the carnage she was witnessing. Ma'am, 230 Drakari vessels in orbital formation around Seraph Prime. They're conducting systematic bombardment of population centers. Estimated civilian casualties in the millions and climbing. Lieutenant Torres paused, checking her readings. Admiral, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. Some kind of underground shelters. Chan nodded grimly. The Serifs were hiding like their ancestors might have hidden from natural disasters. But these predators had come from the stars. What's our fleet status against theirs? 12 ships versus 230, ma'am. They outgun us approximately 40-1. The tactical officer's voice remained professional, but everyone on the bridge understood the mathematics of their situation. Commander Torres signaled the fleet. We implement the Hornet Protocol. We're not here to match them ship for ship. We're here to sting them where they least expect it. The human fleet scattered like seeds on the wind, each ship moving to predetermined coordinates that would have seemed random to conventional military thinking. But these positions had been calculated based on Earth's most successful military doctrines. Guerrilla warfare adapted for space combat, using the environment itself as a weapon. Captain Steele's ship, the used Defiance, moved toward the asteroid belt at the system's edge. His soldiers had trained for this moment, learning to use hostile environments as cover and concealment. The asteroids here were rich in heavy metals and radioactive ores that would play havoc with most sensor systems. But human technology had been designed to function in Earth's electromagnetic storms and radiation zones. Captain, we're picking up Drakari patrol squadrons moving to intercept, reported his navigation officer. 12 heavy cruisers coming our way. Perfect. Steele replied, a grim smile crossing his weathered features. Take us into the radiation field around that dwarf star. Let's see how well their sensors work when we're hiding in a stellar storm. The Defiance dove into a region of space that most civilizations would consider uninhabitable. The radiation levels were lethal to unprotected organic life, and the electromagnetic interference would blind most sensor arrays. But humanity had learned to thrive in Earth's radiation zones, and their ships were shielded accordingly. Meanwhile, on Seraph Prime's surface, Dr. Zaravel 9 huddled with Elder Nim 7 and 300 other survivors in the deepest chambers of the Crystal Archives. The ancient repository had been built to withstand natural disasters, but it was never designed to protect against orbital bombardment. The walls shook with each impact, and cracks were beginning to appear in the crystalline structure. Elder, the surface temperature readings are showing massive spikes. They're using thermal weapons to turn our cities into glass. Zara reported, her delicate fingers working frantically at a portable data unit. If this continues, the planetary ecosystem will collapse within days. A young seraph named Kesvel 3 fluttered his wings anxiously. Dr. Zara, what about your signal? Did the Crucible Forge ones respond? Before Zara could answer, a new sound echoed through the underground chamber. Not the explosive roar of Drakari weapons, but something else entirely. The survivors pressed against their view screens, watching as small, dark shapes moved across the burning sky above them. Unknown vessels, came a transmission in heavily accented galactic standard. This is Captain Marcus Steele of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We received your distress call. Is anyone receiving this transmission? Zara's hands shook as she activated the communication array. Captain Steele, this is Dr. Zaravel 9 of the Seraph Scientific Council. We are 300 survivors hiding in underground chambers. The Drakari have been bombarding our world for 18 hours. Doctor, we're here to help. Can you provide us with safe landing coordinates away from the bombardment zones? Captain, I must warn you, there are no safe zones. The Drakari have orbital superiority with over 200 warships. How many vessels did Earth send? There was a pause before Steele replied, and when he did, his voice carried the confidence of someone who had survived the worst Earth could offer. Doctor, we brought 12 ships and 8,000 of Earth's finest. That should be enough. Elder Naim 7 looked at Zara in confusion. 12 ships against 200. Have these humans come here to die with us? Above the planet, Steele's dropship descended through a storm of plasma fire that would have incinerated most aircraft. But the craft had been designed to operate in the upper atmosphere during Earth's magnetic storms, where radiation and electrical discharges made flight nearly impossible. The Drakari weapons, while powerful, were designed for fighting conventional enemies who would retreat when faced with overwhelming firepower. Humans had never learned to retreat. The dropship landed hard in a field of crystallized sand that had once been a seraph garden. The loading ramp dropped, and Captain Steele emerged wearing full environmental armor designed to protect against every hostile condition Earth's military had ever encountered. Behind him came 40 soldiers, each one a veteran of humanity's harshest training programs. Sergeant Maria Santos had earned her stripes fighting in the Australian outback during the temperature wars, where soldiers regularly operated in heat that exceeded 60 degrees Celsius. Corporal Jiang Wei Lin had served in the Antarctic research stations, where a single equipment failure could mean death by freezing in minutes. Each human soldier represented decades of evolution, under pressure that would have killed most galactic species. Captain, the underground facility is 2 kilometers north of our position, reported his communications specialist. But we're detecting Drakari ground forces between us and the survivors. Steele checked his weapon, a railgun designed to function in any atmospheric condition, including vacuum. Then we go through them. Standard Earth doctrine. Advance until resistance is overcome. The human squad moved across the devastated landscape like ghosts. They used the rubble of destroyed buildings as cover, advanced through toxic clouds that would have been lethal to most life forms, and maintained perfect coordination without radio communication when necessary. This was infantry warfare only. Earth's children knew it. The first Drakari patrol they encountered never knew what hit them. The reptilian warriors were massive, their natural armor thick enough to stop most conventional weapons. They had evolved as apex predators and had carried that physical dominance to the stars. But they had never faced enemies who treated combat as a survival exercise rather than a dominance display. The humans struck from multiple angles simultaneously, using the destroyed terrain to mask their approach. Sergeant Santos put 3 railgun around through a Drakari warrior's armor before he could bring his plasma rifle to bear. Corporal Jang used his knowledge of structural engineering to bring down a weakened building on top of another patrol. But it was the human response to injury that most confused the Drakari forces. When Corporal Rebecca Martinez took a plasma burst to her left shoulder, she didn't retreat or call for medical evacuation. She switched her rifle to her right hand and continued advancing, using a quick seal bandage to stop the bleeding while maintaining fire discipline. "Command, this is Patrol Leader Vex-9," a Drakari warrior reported to his superior. "The new enemy forces are ... unusual. They fight while wounded. They advance into positions that should be untenable. Our weapons are effective, but they do not retreat when injured." In the Drakari command ship, War Leader Krath heard this report with growing confusion. His species had conquered 47 worlds by demonstrating overwhelming superiority. Most civilizations surrendered when faced with certain defeat. Those that didn't were quickly crushed by superior firepower and the Drakari's natural physical advantages. "How many of these new enemies are there?" Krath demanded. "Unknown, War Leader. They appeared to be using individual infiltration tactics rather than massed formations. Our sensors detect small groups moving through areas we consider impassable, due to radiation or structural damage." Meanwhile, Captain Steele's team had reached the entrance to the Crystal Archives. The massive doors had been sealed against bombardment, but Steele's engineers had brought cutting tools, designed to work in space environments where conventional equipment would fail. "Dr. Zara, this is Captain Steele. We're at your location." Opening the entrance now. When the ancient crystal doors finally opened, the Seraphs who emerged found themselves face to face with something they had never seen before. Warriors who looked like they had stepped out of the archive's most ancient legends about the Crucible worlds. Steele removed his helmet, revealing a face weathered by decades of exposure to Earth's harshest environments. His eyes held the calm confidence of someone who had survived everything from desert sandstorms to Arctic blizzards. The humans with him carried that same aura of unshakable determination. Dr. Zaravel-9 stared at the human captain in amazement. The beings from Terra were smaller than Drakari warriors, lacking natural armor or obvious physical weapons. But there was something in their bearing that spoke of strength earned through suffering rather than granted by genetics. "Captain Steele," she whispered. "You came. You actually came." "Doctor, we received your call for help. Earth's children don't abandon allies." Steele looked around at the frightened Seraph civilians, noting their delicate bone structure and obvious physical fragility. "We need to get your people to safety while our fleet deals with the orbital situation." Elder Nim7 approached cautiously, his ancient eyes taking in the details of human physiology. "Captain Steele, our historical records speak of humans as survivors of impossible conditions. Is it true that your world tried to kill you?" Steele managed a slight smile. "Elder, Earth didn't try to kill us. It made us strong enough that nothing else could. Your people are safe now. We've got this." Above the planet, the space battle was entering its decisive phase. The human fleet had used hit-and-run tactics to eliminate over 30 Drakari vessels, but the enemy was adapting. Emperor Krathvar himself had taken command of the orbital fleet, using his centuries of military experience to counter the human tactics. "Admiral Chen," came Captain Rodriguez's voice from the UES Persistence. "The Drakari are consolidating their formation. They're no longer pursuing our ships into the hazardous zones." Chun studied the tactical display, watching as the enemy fleet formed a tight defensive sphere around their command vessel. It was a smart move that negated many of humanity's advantages. All ships implement Phase 2 of Hornet Protocol. It's time to show them what Earth's children learned about swarm tactics. The 12 human vessels suddenly changed their behavior entirely. Instead of hit-and-run attacks, they began moving in perfect coordination, like a school of fish or a flock of birds. Each ship seemed to know instinctively where the others would be, creating a fluid formation that was impossible to predict or counter. On the Drakari flagship, Emperor Krathvar watched this transformation with growing unease. What are they doing? Their formation makes no tactical sense. Sire, they appear to be ... dancing. Each vessel moves in response to the others without any detectable communication. It's like watching a living organism rather than a military formation. The human ships struck the Drakari defensive sphere from 12 directions simultaneously. Their weapons coordinated to create overlapping fields of fire that overwhelmed individual shields. But more disturbing to the Drakari commanders was the way the human ships moved through their return fire, each vessel seeming to anticipate where the shots would be before they were fired. Sire, we cannot achieve target lock on any of their vessels. They move like they can predict our firing patterns. Emperor Krathvar realized with growing horror that he was facing something entirely outside his experience. These humans fought like a pack of predators that had evolved together, each individual aware of the group's needs and capabilities. It was coordination born not of technology, but of millions of years of cooperative survival. On the planet's surface, more human forces were arriving. Commander Lisa Torres led a battalion of Earth's mountain warfare, specialists through terrain that the Drakari had considered impassable. Her soldiers moved through areas of toxic atmosphere and unstable geology like they were taking a casual hike. Commander Torres to all ground units, she broadcast as her team set up a forward operating base in what had once been a Seraph cultural center. Establish overlapping fields of fire and begin search and rescue operations. Every civilian we save is a victory against these bastards. The Drakari ground forces were beginning to understand that they faced an enemy unlike anything in their experience. These humans operated effectively in environments that would incapacitate most civilizations. They fought while injured and advanced through toxic zones without special equipment, and showed no signs of the fear response that the Drakari used to demoralize their enemies. Worse, the humans seemed to be learning from each engagement. Every Drakari tactic was quickly countered, every weapon system analyzed and defeated. It was as if these Crucible Forge warriors treated warfare as just another survival exercise, adapting and overcoming with the same determination they used to survive their impossible homeworld. War leader Krath reported to Emperor Krathvar with growing desperation. Sire, we have lost 60% of our ground forces. The humans fight in coordination that defies explanation. They use our own weapons against us after studying them for mere minutes. They retreat through areas we cannot follow and attack from positions we thought impossible to reach. In the Crystal Archives, Dr. Zara worked with human technicians to evacuate the remaining Seraph civilians. She watched in amazement as Sergeant Santos carried 3 injured Seraphs to safety, simultaneously, moving through debris that would have challenged a healthy Seraph warrior. Sergeant, how do you carry such weight while moving so quickly through this destruction? Zara asked. Santos paused in her evacuation work, not even breathing hard despite the physical exertion that would have exhausted most galactic species. Doctor, on Earth, we call this Tuesday. My grandmother carried more groceries than this up 6 flights of stairs every week until she was 90. Elder Nim7 overheard this exchange and understood something profound about these mysterious humans. They were not just warriors. They were survivors for whom the impossible was merely everyday life. Their strength came not from genetics or technology, but from generations of ancestors who had refused to surrender to a world that offered no mercy. As the rescue operations continued, it became clear that the tide of battle was turning. The human forces were not just defeating the Drakari. They were doing so while suffering minimal casualties and accomplishing objectives that should have been impossible in orbit. Admiral Chin prepared for the final phase of the operation. The Drakari fleet was still formidable, But their coordination was breaking down as human tactics continued to confound their commanders. All ships, this is Admiral Chen. We've saved the people we came to save. Now it's time to send a message to the galaxy about what happens when you threaten the innocent. The human fleet began its final assault, moving with the coordinated precision of apex predators who had finally cornered their prey. Earth's children were about to show the galaxy that sometimes the smallest force, when forged in the right crucible, could overcome any odds. Asterisk from Crucible Forged, Protectors Born, the final. Battle began at dawn over Seraph Prime, as the twin suns rose over a world transformed by war. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of the UES Redemption, watching as her 12 ships moved into attack formation against the remaining Drakari fleet. The enemy still outnumbered them 15-1, but the humans had spent the night capturing and retrofitting Drakari vessels with devastating efficiency. Admiral, engineering reports from the captured ships, Lieutenant Commander Torres announced. Our technical teams have successfully integrated human targeting systems with Drakari weapons arrays. The enemy ships are now under our control. Chun smiled grimly as she watched her tactical display update. Humanity's greatest strength had always been adaptation, and Earth's engineers had spent decades learning to reverse engineer and improve any technology they encountered. The Drakari had built their ships for intimidation and overwhelming firepower, but they had never considered that their own weapons could be turned against them by beings who treated impossible challenges as learning opportunities. Man, we now have operational control of 18 captured Drakari vessels, reported Chief Engineer Martinez over the communication system. These ships are more powerful than anything in our fleet, but their crews never learned to fight against boarding parties who could survive in hard vacuum for extended periods. The night before, human special forces had executed the most audacious operation in military history. Using techniques developed for spacewalk rescue missions in Earth's radiation-heavy orbital zones, they had breached Drakari hulls in areas where no sane being would attempt ship-to-ship combat. The Drakari crews, accustomed to enemies who fought according to conventional space warfare doctrine, had never prepared for boarders who could operate in the void between ships. Captain Steele's voice crackled through the fleet communication network. From the captured Drakari dreadnought, he now commanded, "Admiral, the Drakari computer systems are surprisingly straightforward once you understand their psychology. They build everything for intimidation rather than security. My technical team has gained access to their entire fleet communication network." "Excellent work, Captain. What can you tell us about their command structure?" "Ma'am, Emperor Krathvar is aboard the flagship, leading the remaining fleet. Intelligence indicates he's never personally lost a battle in 50 years of conquest. More importantly, the other Drakari ships are programmed to follow his vessel's orders automatically. If we can capture or destroy the flagship, the rest of their fleet will be leaderless." Admiral Chen studied the tactical situation with the calculating mind that had made her Earth's most successful military strategist. The Drakari fleet was still formidable, but they were fighting according to outdated concepts of warfare. They expected enemies to retreat when faced with superior numbers, to surrender when victory seemed impossible, and to value their own lives over their mission. Objectives. They had never fought a species that had learned to win by refusing to accept defeat. All ships implement Operation Prometheus. We're going to show Emperor Krathvar what happens when he threatens innocence inside of Earth's children. The human fleet, now reinforced with captured Drakari vessels, began to move in a formation that defied every principle of conventional space combat. Instead of maintaining safe distances and exchanging long-range fire, they closed to point-blank range where the Drakari's superior numbers became a disadvantage. In close quarters, the humans' superior coordination and adaptability gave them decisive advantages. Aboard the Drakari flagship, Emperor Krathvar watched his formation disintegrate with growing disbelief. His species had conquered 47 worlds by demonstrating overwhelming superiority that broke enemy morale before battles began. But these humans seemed to fight harder as the odds grew worse. War Leader Drac, explain to me how my fleet is. Losing to a force 1/5 our size, the Emperor demanded, his scaled hands gripping the command chair with enough force to leave claw marks in the metal. War Leader. Drac consulted his tactical displays with visible confusion. Sire, the humans fight in ways that violate basic military doctrine. They advance into positions where they should be destroyed, coordinate without detectable communication, and show no fear response when facing certain death. Most disturbing. They appear to be using our own tactical protocols against us. How is that possible? Sire, they have captured and crewed 18 of our vessels in a single night. Our computer systems show that they have gained access to our command protocols, our weapon specifications, and our fleet coordination algorithms. They are using our own advantages against us. Emperor Krathvar realized that he was facing something unprecedented in his military career. These humans didn't just fight to win. They fought to completely eliminate threats to those under their protection. There was no negotiation, no terms of surrender they would accept that left the Drakari Empire intact to threaten other worlds. On the planet's surface, Commander Torres coordinated the final evacuation of Seraph civilians while her forces hunted down the remaining Drakari ground troops. The contrast between the species was becoming more apparent with each engagement. The Drakari fought like apex predators, confident in their natural superiority. The humans fought like survivors who had learned that the universe offered no guarantees. Accept what you carved out with determination and sacrifice? Commander Torres, this is Dr. Zara, came a transmission from the evacuation site. We have all survivors accounted for. 3,000 Seraphs are safe thanks to your forces. But, Commander, I must ask, how did your people learn to fight with such coordination? Your soldiers work together like they share a single mind. Torres paused in her tactical planning to consider the question. Doctor, on Earth, survival required cooperation. A human alone dies. Humans together can overcome any challenge. We've been practicing teamwork for so long it's become instinct. The answer seemed to confuse the Seraph scientist. But the Drakari also work together. They have strict military hierarchies and coordination protocols. There's a difference between following orders and thinking as a group, Torres explained. The Drakari coordinate because they're told to. Humans coordinate because we have to. One is discipline, the other is evolution. Elder Nim 7, who had been listening to this exchange, spoke quietly into his communicator. Dr. Zara, I think I understand now. These humans are not just warriors. They are a species that learn to survive by becoming something greater than individuals. They fight not just for victory, but for each other. In space, the battle reached its climax as Admiral Chen's fleet surrounded the Drakari flagship. The massive vessel was still the most powerful warship in the engagement, armed with weapons capable of destroying small moons. But power meant nothing if it couldn't be brought to bear effectively. Emperor Krathvar, Admiral Chen broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Sarah Shen of the Terran Expeditionary Force. You have attacked a peaceful civilization under our protection. Surrender now and your crews will be treated humanely. The response came immediately, filled with the rage of a being who had never been denied anything he desired. Human Admiral, I am Emperor Krathvar, conqueror of 47 worlds. I do not surrender to an inferior species from backwater systems. My empire spans half the galaxy. Your people will become slaves or corpses. Chan's reply was spoken with the calm certainty of someone who had faced extinction and survived. Emperor, you made one critical error. You assumed that bigger and stronger always wins. Earth taught us that survival goes to the adaptable, not the powerful. Your empire ends today. The final assault began with a precision that left the watching Seraphs amazed. The human fleet moved like a single organism, each ship knowing exactly where the others would be at any moment. They struck the Drakari flagship from directions that should have been impossible to coordinate, their attacks timed to overwhelm the massive vessel's defensive systems through pure tactical superiority. Captain, Steele's voice came over the communication network as his captured Drakari dreadnought fired on the Emperor's ship. Admiral, enemy shields are down. Boarding craft are away. Ada to bridge capture is 4 minutes. The boarding operation that followed became legendary in galactic military history. Human soldiers, trained to fight in Earth's most hostile environments, moved through a Drakari warship like they belonged there. They operated in sections where hull breaches had vented atmosphere, fought in areas where radiation would have killed most organic life, and maintained coordination through combat conditions that would have broken any conventional military unit. Emperor Krathvar found himself surrounded in his own command center by beings whose presence made no sense according to everything he understood about warfare. These humans had penetrated his flagship's defenses not through superior technology or overwhelming numbers, but through the simple refusal to accept that any obstacle was insurmountable. Captain Steele removed his helmet as he faced the massive Drakari Emperor, showing a weathered human face that spoke of decades spent in conditions that would have killed most galactic species. Emperor Krathvar, I'm Captain Marcus Steele of Earth's Special Forces. Your war is over. The Emperor stared down at the small human, confusion replacing rage. How? My species evolved as apex predators. We are stronger, faster, more naturally armed than your kind. How did you defeat us? Steele considered the question seriously before answering. Emperor, strength without wisdom is just violence. Speed without purpose is just movement. Your people became powerful by conquering others. Mine became strong by surviving Earth. There's a difference. What difference? Krathvar demanded. Your people learn to fight to dominate. My people learn to fight to protect. When you fight for dominance, you can be satisfied with submission. When you fight to protect, you only stop when the threat is eliminated. The truth of those words became clear as reports came in from across the Drakari Empire. Human forces, moving with the same relentless determination they had shown at Seraph Prime, were liberating world after world. The Empire's military doctrine, based on intimidation and overwhelming local superiority, crumbled when faced with an enemy that grew stronger under pressure rather than weaker. Within 6 months, the Drakari Empire had ceased to exist a conquering force. Emperor Krathvar himself became the first galactic leader to surrender unconditionally to humanity, recognizing that his species' survival depended on learning new ways to exist in a universe, where Earth's children now stood as protectors of the innocent on Seraph Prime. The work of rebuilding began immediately. But this was not the same world that had existed before the war. Dr. Zaravel 9 worked alongside human engineers to design new cities that could withstand attack, while Elder Nim 7 helped establish the first interstellar communication network, designed to ensure that no peaceful world would ever again face destruction and isolation. Dr. Zara, Admiral Chen said, as they stood in the foundation of what would become the first Terran Defense Academy on Seraph Prime. Your people's call for help changed everything. Humanity can never go back to isolation now. Zara looked out over the construction site where humans and Seraphs worked together, sharing knowledge and building something stronger than either species could have created alone. Admiral Chun, perhaps. Isolation was never meant to be permanent. Perhaps the galaxy was waiting for someone strong enough to protect its peaceful children. The academy that rose on Seraph Prime became the model for similar institutions across hundreds of worlds. Species that had never known conflict learned basic survival skills from instructors who had graduated from Earth's harshest schools. The curriculum was simple: adaptation, cooperation, and the fundamental truth that surrender was never an option when protecting innocence. Commander Torres, now director of the Academy's tactical training program, stood before her first class of mixed species cadets. Among them were former Drakari warriors, learning to fight for protection rather than conquest. Delicate seraphs discovering inner strength they never knew they possessed, and humans sharing the lessons Earth had taught through millennia of struggle. Students, Torres began addressing beings from dozens of different worlds. You are here to learn something that cannot be taught through books or simulations. You are here to learn that the strongest force in the universe is not the biggest weapon or the most powerful ship. It is the determination to never give up when fighting for something greater than yourself. A young Drakari warrior, his scales still bearing the scars of combat against human forces, raised his hand. Director Torres, my people believe that strength came from our natural advantages. How do we learn to fight like humans? Torres smiled, remembering her own journey from Earth's toxic industrial zones to the stars. Cadet Vex, you don't learn to fight like humans. You learn to fight like yourself, but with the understanding that every challenge makes you stronger, every defeat teaches you something new, and every person you protect is worth more than your own life. Across the galaxy, the impact of humanity's intervention continued to spread. The Galactic Council, dormant since the Drakari expansion began, reconvened with humanity as its newest and most influential member. Trade routes reopened as species. No longer feared military conquest. Scientific cooperation flourished as civilizations. Shared knowledge without fear of it being turned into weapons. But perhaps the most significant change was philosophical. The galaxy had learned that evolution and technology were not the only paths to strength. There was another way, demonstrated by a species that had emerged from a world so harsh that it had forged survivors rather than conquerors. Captain Steele, now Admiral Steele and commander of the Terran Protection Fleet, stood on the bridge of his flagship as it patrolled the former Drakari territory. His ships carried crews from dozens of different species, all united by the principles humanity had brought to the galaxy. Protect the innocent, adapt to any challenge, and never surrender in the face of injustice. Admiral, reported his communications. Officer, a young seraph named Casvel III, who had been inspired to join Terran forces after witnessing the rescue of his world. We're receiving a distress signal from the Outer Rim. Unknown aggressors attacking the mining colonies of Kepler 186. Steele looked out at the stars that no longer seemed empty and hostile, but filled with civilizations that Earth's children had sworn to protect. Set course for Kepler 186, maximum speed. Signal the fleet. Another world needs to learn what happens when you threaten the innocence inside of humanity. As the Terran Protection Fleet jumped to hyperspace, racing toward another cry for help from distant strangers, the galaxy continued its ancient rotation around its center, but something fundamental had changed. The universe was no longer a place where the strong preyed upon the weak without consequence. Earth's children had taken their place among the stars, not as conquerors seeking dominance, but as guardians forged in the crucible of a world that had taught them the most important lesson of all. True strength comes not from what you can destroy, but from what you are willing to sacrifice to protect. And in the deepest archives of 1,000 worlds, new legends began to form. Stories of the beings from Terra, the Deathworld that had created not monsters, but heroes. Tales of warriors who fought hardest when the odds were worst, who grew stronger under pressure, and who would cross the galaxy to answer a cry for help from strangers. The age of Earth's isolation was over. The age of humanity's guardianship had begun. And across the stars, civilizations that had forgotten what hope looked like began to remember that sometimes, in the darkest hour, salvation came from the most unexpected places, from a small blue world on the edge of nowhere, where evolution had forged a species that refused to surrender, refused to abandon the innocent, and refused to accept that any challenge was too great to overcome. The galaxy was no longer alone. Earth's children were coming home. Asterisk.